Welcome to the Capital Light Assembly podcast brought to you by Edison Manufacturing and Engineering. Edison is your low volume contract manufacturing partner focused on capital light assembly of complex mobility and energy products. I'm Brandon Bartnick, joined today by Erik Gildemeister. Erik, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So Erik, for introduction, Erik is finance director at Wallbank Industrial, which includes Edison as well as our sister company, Wallbank Springs. And your perspective from the finance side is really interesting. Also, your experience coming from a high volume automotive supplier and manufacturing world. I'm really interested to get your thought on kind of how what we do is similar and different, and like how really the differences between high volume production and low volume production. So maybe we start with similarity. So based on what you've seen in your previous life and then now here working with Edison, what do you see as kind of the core fundamental ideas and similarities in execution for high volume production, as well as what we're doing in the low volume complex assembly space?
Yeah, sure. So my prior life, I was in a large scale, capital intensive tier one automotive supply manufacturing plant, serving in a controller capacity. And when I compare and contrast on the comparison side with that large scale manufacturing environment versus Edison, things that we do the same, or things that we're motivated the same to do, is we want to deliver a quality product in a timely manner that meets or exceeds our customers' expectations. And along the way of doing that, we're going to be motivated to be receptive to customer inputs as best we can. That's on a customer facing side. Inwardly looking, Edison and large scale manufacturers were going to be motivated to produce exceptional products in a repeatable manner in the most efficient way possible. And in both situations, we're going to be kind of hyper focused on capital deployment. We want to be the best stewards of our capital resources. So I think that's producing quality, repeatable products to the customer's timeline and expectations, and aiming to exceed their expectations is really where I see, the most similarities.
So the foundations of running a good business and executing and being customer centric, being smart with the capital deployment, as from you on the finance side, that's kind of the purpose of business, right?
That's right.
Making a great return on the deployed capital. That makes sense. There's a lot of overlap there. So then the obvious kind of second end of that is, so where are the biggest differences you see between that high volume capital intensive world and what we're doing?
Yeah, I think there's going to be more differences on the operational side between the two versus similarities. And I'll start. So, in my experience, the large scale manufacturing plants that are capital intensive, which most seem to be are, the name of the game is economies of scale. And the two driving forces in economies of scale is volume, right? Making sure there's a sufficient amount of volume, and then that volume is at an appropriate variable margin. So those two forces have to work very hard together to cover a very heavy capital asset base that supports it. And that business model works well. It's tried and true. There's plenty of examples of that working, efficiently, but it works when there is a fixed product portfolio, meaning the products that those environments produce are consistent. The mix doesn't necessarily change all that often. So the product portfolio is fixed more or less, and the volumes are predictable. There's a good forecast that can be applied to that product portfolio. So, that environment, if you think about, new launches or R&D efforts or low volume ideas, those have no home in large scale manufacturing plants. And so how is Edison different? So we're not bound by the heavy capital asset base. We describe ourselves as being capital light. And what does that mean? It means, we deploy a semi-automated process complemented by technology to our people team to achieve a repeatable process. And we do that in a dynamic environment. And like, what does dynamic mean? Like, what does that actually mean in our instance? It means that we can be receptive and we can respond to the changes that our customers have along the way. So that like I mentioned in my opening comments, I think both Edison and others would say we're both motivated to be receptive to customer input. So, at start of production, in production, late in the life cycle, we want to be receptive to their needs and adjust work accordingly. Edison's better positioned to do that in practice due to being capital light, due to the nature of our business.
Yeah, it's interesting comparing the internal and external perspective here, right? Of like, so being capital light, that defines to some extent the way that we do business, and we're not eager to spend many millions of dollars on automation or significant capital expenditures, and that impacts the way that we're running our internal business. But we're not doing that just, or even primarily for our own doing. We're doing it because it allows us to serve our customers in a different way. And the finance perspective, I think, is really interesting. So if you put yourself in the shoes of a customer who has, this complex product that needs to be built in often low volumes, or whatever reason it doesn't fit well this profile of have capital intensive, highly automated production, what would you care about from the finance side, and how does our approach play into that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll put myself in the shoes of being, a controller again in a large plant. And if I had a team come to me with a new idea, it's going to disrupt the core business. So the likelihood that the business case makes sense to test or trial a low volume idea, it's likely just not going to pass the numerical check, right? The numbers aren't going to make sense on it for the reasons we said before. So what does that mean? What does Edison mean for somebody in that position? Edison is an option. We create a path for those low volume opportunities to get trialed, to happen, to even exist. And so, we're going to produce a quality product. We're going to do it on time. Oh, and by the way, we're going to have minimal upfront capital requirements. So the business case is a little bit different than it would be if you tried to do it in a legacy large scale plant. Mm-hmm. And along the way, because maybe an early stage product, we can respond and receive changes, and it's not going to be all that disruptive. So when I think about risk management in terms of capital allocation, we really are we help mitigate risk in proving out smaller volume opportunities that don't have a home in the big manufacturing plants.
Yeah, this is something that I've been thinking about a lot from talking with various customers, and it seems like there's definitely the change in phases of production and the opportunity. You mentioned a large volume plant. Maybe we give the opportunity for them to explore a product that maybe starts lower volume, but there's also there's a whole class of products that are going to be low volume or aren't going to fit well in a capital intensive production facility, possibly for the life of that product, for 5, 10, 20 years, whoever or however long it might be. And I appreciate your thought here, but it seemed like those types of products kind of historically never get off the ground because there's not a business case that can close in an environment where you have one approach that works, that is used often for production. Doesn't fit well for this type of product. And it's essentially one of the things that we might be offering is the opportunity for those products to come to life, come to market, allow our customer to enter markets that maybe they couldn't otherwise based on their internal limitations. Is that a reasonable way to think about it?
That's correct. It's things that I've experienced in my past. And if I think about the options available to say other organizations who have a new product that they want to trial, they want to maybe test and do a market study on, your options are to consume high volume capacity, which is likely not going to happen, or you're left with two other options which aren't all that attractive. One is building a prototype division. Sometimes that's bolted onto a plant to realize some synergies, but still a capital intensive undertaking nonetheless. Or two, it's dedicating it could be a line that's going to run all, say, service, low volume, prototypes, advanced manufacturing, et cetera. And it's going to be the cats and dogs line, if you will. And it's also not that attractive of an option because it's limited in its ability to respond to change, and they're usually capacitized, and they're usually not the most advanced capital asset line. So there's limitations to those who have new product ideas in the legacy business environment on how to do a proof of concept, and Edison fits that need nicely.
Yeah, cool. I think that's a good place to leave it. Erik, again, really appreciate you joining for this episode of the Capital Assembly Podcast. I always appreciate your thoughts and coming from engineering background, I tend to think about things a certain way, and I appreciate how you always have this financial lens to put on things and to frame discussions and decisions and values and all that type of thing. So a lot of fun. Appreciate the input.
Yeah, thank you for the time. I appreciate it.